So we are in a single chest rep. Single chest rep should always be your opening move, especially because then it leads you into katakatame, which we're going to look at in a second, which should always be your opening submission. So let's recap a little bit the 4 controlled positions that we have from the single chest rep. So a situation in which I'm holding my partner's shoulder or lat and my own elbow. From this position, I can see my partner's forearm and I can start driving forward until my head potentially goes to the floor. I can lock my feet. I can do all sorts of things. Otherwise, I can, if I don't want to put as much pressure on my partner, maybe I want to be a bit more mobile, I want to switch to other controls, I can stay here, and that's still an amazing position that puts an enormous amount of stress on your partner. So from here, we have 4 major control positions that lead into different submissions, okay? So we have the single chest rep, which is this one. When we want to transition to the other positions, we have to go to what we call a far trap control. So I want to lift my partner's head and I want to go and bite basically between his far trap and this throat. Okay, so basically I have a cross space with an arm in. If I were in side control, this would be a near side underhook. Okay, this is how near side underhook works. So this is very important. Every time I switch from one position to the next, I have to lift the head, make space, and pass here. Okay, do this pass off. At this point, I can really emphasize in bringing weight into my shoulder behind my partner's elbow. And if I want to put even more pressure, I can start switching my legs, my hips, and now I have 1 driving leg and 2 driving legs. And now I can really emphasizing putting a lot of pressure on my partner. So when he goes for whatever reason to do this sort of things, it doesn't really matter. As soon as I switch my hips and I start driving, when he tries to regain his elbow, it's really, really hard because I can really drive with my legs into one of his arms. So obviously, it's a very, very powerful move. I switch and I start driving into him. At this point, I have the luxury of having 1 free arm because my left arm controls both his shoulder and his head, and my feet are in charge of putting pressure. At this point, I can physically grab and move his arm. Usually an arm against an arm is going to be a pretty hard battle to win, but in this case, he's in a very compromised position. His limb is so far away from his score, high above the shoulder is going to be very weak, plus I have the pressure of my shoulders and legs. I can really just put the arm through. At this point, I can catch it, and this is what we call a arm wrap. I can reinforce this configuration to what we call a figure 4 arm wrap. Okay. At this point, my chest is behind his arm and above his triceps. Okay. If you see what's happening here, we went from a situation in which I had pinned an arm, and through a series of manipulations, we got to a situation in which I have passed an arm. Okay? You could potentially get to a figure 4 arm wrap or just a simple arm wrap straight from the get-go. So if I were to pin the arm and he were to go and defend, to catch, I can just use my chest to block his arm, and almost like a magic trick, I am in a figure 4 arm wrap. Okay? So you can see this dilemma between passing and pinning kind of playing out. So, I got here, I physically move, and I got to this position that I can subsequently reinforce with this. Okay, this is a great control position because you really, when your partner goes to turn into you, It's really very hard because I control his arm, I'm behind his arm, I control his wrist and I'm behind his arm. Really the only position where I can go is basically offering back exposure, okay? I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure, and this is a superb position to take the back, which we're going to look in a second. So we have the single chest wrap. We have far lat. We have a figure 4 or arm wrap, or figure 4 arm wrap, a bit more stable. The fourth position, which is one of the absolute staple of the sport, is a double chest wrap, or also known as double underhook. So you will see this from a single chest wrap. You will see this very often when your partner starts posting on your shoulder and start bridging to regain control of his elbow. This is not necessarily a bad choice on his side, because he wants to gain his elbow back. He makes a little bit of space with the bridge, and he helps the bridge with his left hand behind my shoulder. He bridges and he gained this elbow back, and now he can go back to his escapes. As soon as I see him posting on my shoulder, I switch to a far lat, I switch my hips, and I start driving forward. When I start driving forward, his post doesn't mean anything, okay? Because I'm basing out with my leg, and I'm pushing his shoulder in that direction. When he goes to bridge into me, it really doesn't mean anything, okay? I have the privilege of one free arm, and I start catching another underhook. It's actually very hard for him to prevent me from getting this underhook, okay? Even if he goes and stays here very tight, there's only so much he can do to hide his arm. Even if he really tries to keep his arm and his elbow close to his chest, there's really so much he can hide this. And now this is such a compromised position. They're really just a simple ratchet far and away, and then towards the head should always be enough for you to get double underhook. As soon as I get to this position, we're back in the same situation, okay? In which now I can get a checkpoint on his head, lift, and get the far shoulder. And now I get my own elbow. Okay, so once again, I have a far lat. I go and target his elbow, wherever that might be. If I get proper inside position, great. If I don't, just go underneath and catch his elbow. Walk, 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 walk. A checkpoint. Now I lift and I catch the far shoulder. And now I catch my own elbow. This is exactly the same pattern that we had when we went to a single chest wrap. At this point, I can start again driving forward, crossing my feet if necessary. I can really cook my partner for a long period of time. And really, the less I move, the less chances he has to get out. A good opponent will target my movements to start going into his escape. It's very, very hard for him to get out if I don't do much, okay? He's gonna start targeting my movement as a time window to get into his escapes, okay? So these are the control positions. As a general rule, it's a very basic rule of thumb. From a single chest wrap, I'm gonna go into karagatame, so arm triangle. From a far lat, this is the path to the back. So far lat, figure 4, this is supreme back taking position. Double underhook, this is armbar territory. Okay, this is just a very general rule of thumb, but as a general rule, that's what you want to be looking at. You never want to go into armbar if you don't have double underhook. Going to armbar from a single chest rep is often will result into a very weak armbar. He's going to get his elbow inside, and like just things are going to be falling apart fairly quickly. And vice versa is going to be pretty hard to go into Karagatame. If you're from here, it's just going to be a bit awkward. Okay. So to recap very quickly, single chest rep, Karagatame, far lat, that's the pass to the back. Figure 4, that's the back. Double underhook, that's armbar.